Hello, everybody. This is Charles Alvarez again, CEO of Cornerstone. Welcome to another podcast with a wonderful guest. Today, we are joined by Nico Kruger. He is the head of solution engineering for Rollbar. Nico, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
We're very thankful that you are here. So, tell us a little bit about you, just from a personal basis. Where did you grow up? How did you get into this business? And how did you land at Rollbar?
Absolutely. So, born and bred at the bottom part of Africa, come from South Africa natively. So, grew up there. Always had a big interest in things software related and computers. So, always dabbled when we were younger, building things, and back in the days, even having to write some of your own drivers for printers and whatnot. And went on to study computer engineering. Definitely liked the software part more than the hardware part, I would say. And so that got me into working for companies that made some software, and eventually got my first position with a company called Pine Software out of Mason, Ohio. And they sold into the developer market, which I really liked because I really was able to speak to these people and understood the problems they had. And during my time with them, I was fortunate enough to move to Australia to open up an office there for them. Spent about 10 years in Australia as we built out the sales and solutions engineering office there. And then they were acquired by a company called Perforce, and that got me here over to United States, living in Minnesota at the moment. So a bit of a weather change from what I was used to growing up in South Africa and certainly living in Australia. Not a lot of snow over there, but great opportunity with them to work through lots of acquisitions, take existing products to market, new products, and then got the opportunity to go to Rollbar, where I work with a lot of developers again, but taking that existing product, growing it, and taking some new things to market. But on a personal side, I have a couple of kids. I've learned ice hockey now, so I do the commentating at ice hockey games for my son,
Oh,
which I
cool.
quite like. So I've learned the rules, and you could probably, I've got the Golden Microphone Award I got last year. So that keeps me entertained and very much something I enjoy doing on the sides as well. So hopefully that gives people a sense of who I am and what I like to do.
So tell us a little about Rollbar. What does Rollbar do, and who do you do it to, and really what challenges do they need? Does a prospect or a client need to be facing for it be worthwhile for them to have a conversation with you and your firm?
Absolutely. I think the best way to describe it is, we've been working a lot on our vision. And so what we aim for is we help people build boldly, fix fast, and deliver decisively. And so what that means is our audience are people who make software products. So typically these would be software engineers or SREs that build software, typically at quite a large scale. So typically they start small, but they grow over time, and they have a need where they're people who are really proud of what they've built. And so they care about the experience their customers are having with the product. And so from a rollbar perspective, what that means is we help our customers know when something is breaking before their customers even know. And that's the easiest way to explain it. If you've ever, bought something on Amazon, if you've booked a meal somewhere or a ride share, you've used the CRM system today, you've used Rollbar without knowing it. But those companies that pride themselves on quality want us because in a couple of seconds, we'll tell you when it breaks, what line of code broke, who committed that line of code, and how to fix it. And that changes the time to find and solve problems from days to really minutes. And so that's really the value we give to people looking specifically, like I said, software developers mostly.
Sounds good. So how does your tool, how does your platform differ from others in the marketplace, from others that say that they can do something similar?
Absolutely. So we do have a very good market, meaning there are other people that have validated this problem. So it's definitely a problem that has a fair few competitors in it. One of the things we focus on is the developers and code level. So a lot of our competitors sit outside on the environment. So if you think of a Kubernetes cluster or server, they have some agents running on there, where with Rollbar, we are compiled into your code. And so what that does give us is a unique advantage where we have access to more things at runtime, which developers are used to when they're debugging. So if you're doing something in VS Code or Cursor or whatever you use, when you're debugging and there's a problem, you can see the parameters coming in. You can see all the things in the stack trace. You can debug very easily. If you do that in production, it becomes immensely harder because you just don't have access. You've got to go through tons of logs. And Rollbar flips that and says, in production, we can give you that same rich data to then figure out what the problem is. And that really speeds up essentially the problem solving time because you get all this data you're used to in a debug environment.
Makes perfect sense. So give us some examples of how this has worked in your clients. Give us how you found them in the first place, what challenges they were having in software development, what things they may have tried to do in the past, Nico, to address those issues, and what you did and what the end result was. If you can give us a couple of those examples, I think that will really crystallize the value to our audience.
Absolutely. So I always use some of the examples. One of our largest customers, and most people probably listening to this would have used them at some point. So if you've bought something online, you've interacted with it. And so the biggest problem they experienced at the volume they had was knowing when something is really a problem. And that might seem, hey, that should be easy, but it isn't that easy if you've got millions of people transacting in a given hour. You've got billions of things going wrong, going to log files. Does the checkout work? It works sometimes, doesn't work. So the volume becomes a problem. And so for them, it was, first of all, having visibility into this is the most important problem. And what is that problem? So to give you a sense of that, let's say you've got a million people checking out on a shopping cart and it breaks, you could have a million logs. And so for a developer to go through that, try to figure out something, that's hard. What Rollbar does, it takes all that stuff and it gives it a fingerprint, just like a human being. So we know if something is unique or not. And so what that does for our customers says, hey, this is the most important problem happening right now. It's happening to so many people, affecting, so much in revenue, for example, and then they can take that and solve it. And so for our customers, once they know that data, that's actually where the value comes in. The value now comes in that you know about it and you can solve that in hours versus days. And so one of our largest customers in the e-commerce space, they saved about, I think they called it about 30 man hours on
Wow.
a given issue to debug it. And so for them, that was massive because, they could take those same people, solve something in an hour or two, get it out into production again, instead of, using them for building something new, flashy, they had to spend all this time on debug. So that was the value. The other one we typically see in most of our customer stories when people really start using Rollbar for the first time, they say, hey, I didn't know we had these problems in our app. They literally did not have the
Uh,
visibility. And that eye opener, you go, oh, that explains why people would sometimes complain about this. That visibility into what's going wrong. And I would say that is the number one thing. Then you get into, hey, how does this speed up debugging? But I would say the time that we give people back in debugging, and in also the fact that we can use it now with AI workflows to say, hey, this is wrong, turn off a feature flag, or stop a canary rollout. All of a sudden, that is now going from hours to minutes or seconds, which is really, I think, a big game changer.
Yep, that's awesome. So it sounds like it makes the development process and the debugging process a whole lot easier for the developers so they can get their projects done faster and on budget, correct?
That's absolutely spot on. And really keeping production up and making sure that you are impacting as few as of your customers as humanly possible, right? So that you can keep revenue. And we see that for mostly, I would say, our type of customer is a customer who makes money or revenue through their application or API, where if that thing goes down, it affects the business directly. So it's absolutely critical to have that resilience and get it back up and running.
Makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. Have your customers mentioned to you or your clients mentioned to you, hey, ever since we started using Rollbar, we've been able to get our projects done faster and reduce the cost and the lead time associated with projects. Have you heard them say that?
We have. Now, to be fair, I've worked in lots of companies with dev tools, and everybody would claim that. So for us,
Sure.
it is, what is, I would say, the proof in the pudding. So, everybody will claim that, but the way we look at that is the cycle between Rollbar detecting it and you resolving it, or if you do a commit, it's automatically resolved in Rollbar. What does that mean time to resolution? And so that is where you can truly start to measure, okay, we've gone from days to hours. And now you say, well, we've really actually given you back that time. And now people say, hey, that translates into whatever it is for them on the new development side. But for us, it's really measuring the proof of that because I do think there's a lot of companies that'll say that. But how do you truly measure that, right? How do you say it's actually happening in dev teams?
Have they given you any type of indication to say, gosh, our time to get projects done has gone down by X%, or is it just sometimes it's just a general feeling? Because quite frankly, I mean, I started my career at Accenture, and
Yep.
quite frankly, you know, we had such a hard time believing that a tool such as yours could really help us until we used it. And we're like, wow, we have saved a lot of time in development work. And our clients say, oh, how much? I'm like, I don't know. We've never developed it this fast before.
Yeah, we had one customer, I think it was also a large one in the consulting field. They actually studied this and they said they saved about 25%, right,
Wow.
of development time. So that was taking that gut feeling and going, okay, well, let's put these numbers together and actually, because they could measure before and after, because they had how long releases used to take. And now after Rollbar, like how did it speed up? And what you start to see is actually a flywheel effect because at the beginning you get 5, 10, but then it compounds because all of a sudden what Rollbar helps you do is get to the bottom of a problem. So the technical debt piece we help with a lot because what Rollbar does uniquely well is if you bring an error back, we actually know that you introduced it before and now it's back. So we can tell you this commit you just did actually reintroduced this problem. And that visibility, that's when I think that flywheel starts to speed up because that regression can have much simpler fix for that because you have that visibility into, oh, this is the commit, right? This is where we went wrong. So I think it's really that flywheel of speeding that up over time.
Makes perfect sense. So you all have some experience, some really cool growth over the past, couple of years. What do you find to be the reason for that? And what are some of the challenges that you've had on the other hand to really identify with our audience that has maybe stunted growth or, not kind of not helped you grow as fast as you would like?
Yeah, I think for us, we solve a real problem that developers face, and we have competition, which is great. And so we have a great product and solution, but it is a single product and a single solution. And so the growth on that has been very good. We are able to sign up customers ranging from small, mid-sized to enterprise. So that flywheel works. We have a problem we solve. It is a market that is looking to solve this. And we've seen more code being generated, not only by humans, but also AI, which compounds the number of problems, which is really great for Rollbar. So we have more things we can now help you with. If you think of what we're seeing with our customers, they want to fix things faster. So we've seen growth in the fact that people need our data to give to Claude Code or to a GPT and say, hey, what are the top 5 problems in my production app? Great, here's the list. What's the root cause? Get that debug data from Rollbar, and the AI now has the line of code, all the context from us, and to suggest a fix. And they are starting to implement these workflows. So we've seen some great action there. The problem is, from a company perspective, a single product company. So we are in the midst of going into our public beta for our first what I would call our first next product. And so we are now expanding on the problem we solve today. We've seen other opportunities in and around us that we think we can solve. And so that's really, we believe, going to be the catalyst to additional compound growth because we now have some additional things we can help our existing customer base with.
That makes perfect sense. That makes a whole lot of sense. Um, So, in terms of how somebody can reach you and what challenges they need to be facing for them to make sense to actually have a conversation with you, if you're talking to your target audience right now, what do they need to be experienced for it to be a good opportunity to reach out to? And before we actually go into that, what is the best way for somebody to contact you?
Absolutely. So for Rollbar, if you go to rollbar.com, again, on our website, go and look at the content we've got. It really explains the solutions to the various problems you might be facing. But sign up, use the product. We do have a contact us page. If you want to set up a demo, we can absolutely help you with that. But Rollbar, if you're a developer, really it's takes you 5 minutes to set it up, and that visibility you'll go, the aha moment is 5 minutes in when you go, I didn't know this was happening. So I would say for the audience, if you're a developer who's ever released something into production and you have taken hours going through logs, trying to get to the bottom of a problem, Rollbar is for you because it'll take that time, condense it down, and we'll give you that visibility. It'll make you, instead of waking up 20 times at night, getting errors and warnings, we'll actually tell you what's really breaking, and the rest is probably just noise, and we can help you get rid of that. So if you face those problems, we're probably a very good fit for you.
Very cool. Very cool. One more time, how can somebody get a hold of you? That website one more time, please, Nico?
Absolutely. Rollbar.com. And if you want to get a demo, rollbar.com/contact us.
So let's talk a little bit about implementation because, a lot of these tools sound so great and so awesome. And then, it gets down to it's like, well, this sounds really good, but gosh, what is it going to take to implement? So kind of walk us through your implementation process. What do you guys undertake? What is the experience for your clients? How much time does their technical team at all need to spend? What's the learning curve? So, there's lots of cool tools in the marketplace, but what I've always thought separates the men from the boys are how easy it is to implement. Like, what's the implementation experience? Because let's face it, that's really the first detailed exposure your new clients get with your implementation team and with your company. So walk us through that, Nico. How hard or easy is it to implement?
That's absolutely spot on. I think you're absolutely right. That is really where you start to see, everything looks great in a demo, I always say, until you get your hands on it, right? And so what does that look for like for Rollbar? So for us, our audience are technical people. So if you don't open up an IDE and write code, it'll be very hard for you. But again, that's not our audience. So for a developer who isn't our audience, we are an SDK. So we are something that you will be installing with your code. So if you're using, npm package manager, you'll just go and grab a Rollbar package, something like Nougat or whatever the case might be. So you'll go ahead and install the Rollbar SDK. To activate that SDK, meaning to send data to Rollbar when your app runs into a problem, is 5 lines of code, which you copy and paste during our onboarding process. So what that does mean is, as a developer, you've got to have the code open, add the Rollbar SDK, paste in the lines of code. The thing that makes Rollbar easy is because we hook into your existing frameworks exception or error handling. So you do not have to go and modify all your lines of code to go and say, hey, send this to Rollbar. Absolutely not, because all frameworks have a way of catching errors, handled or unhandled, and Rollbar simply connects to that existing infrastructure in any coding language and says, thank you very much, I'll have that information, and then it sends it over to Rollbar. And so that piece typically takes people, I always say it's, 5 to 10 minutes to copy that over and a cup of tea, and you're off to the races. Typically deployment, getting it out and through the pipeline takes longer. But then once you start to get data into Rollbar, from our perspective, what our developer users want is to see the problem, the stack trace, and all the data. And that is straight and upfront in Rollbar. So there really isn't, I would say, a massive learning curve. What typically people start to, I think, spend time on is what we see in our larger customers is automating all of this. So
Yeah.
we just spoke about, hey, I had to install a package, do that. Our biggest customers, if you ask their developers, how do you install Rollbar? Nobody knows. It happens automatically through the pipeline. So if you spin up a new project, go ahead and Rollbar's instrumented automatically for you. So what makes Rollbar different is we can do that. We have APIs and things that we can do to help our customers automate that setup process completely. So a developer just gets the magic of the Rollbar era.
Very cool. And what would you say is the average implementation time? I know that there's probably different use cases for different clients, but kind of give us a range, like from the time they sign a contract to have the kickoff call to do the implementation to go live. How long does that typically last?
So we have an implementation process, a 30, 60, 90-day window. Within 30 days, you are up and running and you are sending data to Rollbar. Typically, that happens in the first week. So now we are getting data. So then it's tweaking. Are there additional things that your developers would need to speed up the debug process even further? So to give you examples, you might want to know during the checkout process, if they're from a specific country, what sort of data about the user do you want? Maybe you don't want any data, so get rid of personal information. So that's where we do a bit of tweaking with the customer. What do they want to collect? And add that additional payload data. And what makes Rollbar different is you can send whatever you want as additional payload data. So our customers send a lot of additional payload data, and that's the things that our competitors They simply can't take, they can take like 30 additional payload items. We can take as many as you like. So once that is set up within the third 30 days, you're getting alerts, you're getting notifications, and developers are starting to look at this. And typically on the 60-day windows where we say, okay, that's great, let's start to automate this. So now we're getting into not only are you getting notified, but how do we make this part of your pipeline? So if you're using Jenkins or GitHub Actions, whenever you do a deploy, you actually notify Rollbar about the deploy so we can tie the deployments to errors. What version is running? If you're running many Kubernetes instances and clusters, this one might be running an older version of your code. So how do we make those things automated? Then in the last 30 days, so a 90-day window, is making sure that we've obviously trained everybody for using it, but then also exposing them to what we call the advanced automation. So that is where we're saying, great, you have an error. Could you automatically turn off a feature flag? Could you automatically stop deployments from happening or roll back? A good example would be what our biggest customers, and the ones I would say, not the biggest, the ones that use it the best, when they deploy, they look to Rollbar to say, how many brand new errors did we introduce in this deployment? If that number exceeds a specific number they want to hit, if it goes over that, it automatically stops deployment and rolls back. With feature flags, it's simply just turning off a feature flag. And that is where that final 90 days, I would say, the magic happens. That's where you go from manually catching things, alerting, to the final 90 days, you're now automating that process end to end, which I think once you get there, it's a nice place to be because it just feels like things happen automatically.
Hmm. Sure. That makes perfect sense. And in terms of, how your clients measure your ROI, I mean, obviously, saving time on a project, reducing it, but are there certain gauges that you would recommend that your clients or people listening to the call say, look, what the gauge that we affect the most, or the gauges we affect the most are X, Y, and Z, like a reduction in debugging time, a reduction in project timelines. Like I said, I know that sometimes that's hard to measure because so many times people think, well, it just takes this long because it's always taken this long.
Yeah.
But it seems like you're making a real dent in the space and making sure that they're able to debug their software much faster. So if somebody is saying, hey, how do I measure your ROI and how fast can I get that ROI? What would be your answer to that?
So for a lot of companies, it's fewer incidents. And so what they start to measure is the application that's running is actually online or available more to our customers. So a lot of companies struggle where they have lots of little incidents going. So what that means is you're taking developers to try and solve what this problem is. And so once you get Rollbar, what we see people, they have fewer incidents because all of a sudden they actually know about these problems. So you're getting that time back. But also what's more important is you're actually getting the application to be available to your customers, which is way more important. That
Right.
reputational risk where things just doesn't work or I can't do messaging or whatever the app might be when it's down. So that's the first thing we typically see when companies have lots of incidents. We get Rollbar in there, they see a first reduction in incidents because they start to know about problems. Secondly, it's the time to then figure out to solve that problem. And like I said, typically between 25 to 30% would be the reduction in just debug time. So that is
That's
a fair
phenomenal.
chunk for
That's
most people. I mean, that's a lot of time spending. And the previous life, they would have had to go through logs, all that sort of stuff. And now you're just not doing that at all, which is great. And then I would say for our revenue focused customers where money is coming through the app, it's really all about that thing cannot have transactional problems where I'm busy making money. I need to know instantly. And so one of our largest customers in the e-commerce space, they have very, very specific alerts. If you do so much as the wrong error on that checkout page, it is the number one thing in their business. So you also get to prioritize important versus fluff,
yeah,
right? And that also is now where you start to get that time back because you're not spending time on things that really and truly don't matter.
that's awesome. That's great. Nico, is there any questions that I should have asked you that I didn't, or any information or best practices that you would like to provide our audience or, developers listening to this that you think they should really know?
I think from our perspective, we'd love to people go look at Rollbar, experience and try it out. I would say for those starting to figure out how to use AI, come and have a chat to us. We are having very good conversations with many larger companies that are looking to say, how do we use the things we've got today, the data we've got, like from Rollbar, and speed up software debugging, not only by people, but giving people access to tools to, with AI and all these things to start to connect them and actually speed that up. The other thing I would say is we'd love to speak to people as we're bringing out a brand new product to market called Session Replay. Going from the stack trace to those variables are great, but seeing a picture of what the customer experienced, the problems they ran into visually, we believe is going to be a game changer. And we've had a very good private beta so far. In fact, we've actually signed up our first paying customer during the beta, which is really good. So we'd love people to come and have a look at it, give us some honest feedback on it as well, but start to experience what it looks like debugging without a blindfold, right? How does that experience change when you start to visually see what your customers are experiencing?
That's very cool. So it sounds like there is an opportunity for them to try the technology out before making a commitment to it, correct?
Absolutely. And Rollbar has always been a free forever model when it comes to we have a free plan forever. So if you are a developer and you just want to test it out, there's a free plan forever. Don't need a credit card. You can start using it. And if you start to grow and you need more, you can make a commitment. But certainly for a trial, it doesn't cost you anything. There's no commitment. You can go ahead and start to get some of these benefits pretty much immediately.
Outstanding. Nico, thank you so much for being on the call today. I think you did a fantastic job. Really, really fascinating and cool tool. I'm glad that we can tell our audience about it. So thank you so much. One more time, Nico Kruger with Robot and that website one more time, Nico.
Thank you very much for having me. Yep, go to rollbar.com. Give us a look. If you have any questions, we'd love to work with you to see how we can save you some time on making phenomenal software for your customers.
Awesome. Thank you, Nico, for what you're doing for the development community. And please go check him out. It sounds like a wonderful tool. And we're very selective on who we pick to be on these podcasts. So please do go check him out because I know I would rack my brains for hours trying to find out what an issue with the code is, and I'm missing a stupid comma. And this
That's right.
tool can find that out much faster. So thank you so much, Nico.
No worries. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Bye bye.